Get a big guy, build in the trenches, Matt. I think is what the Bears will zero in at the number 10 overall pick in this draft. And if they do zero in on offensive line or defensive line, which side do you think that they would be better off going, defensive line or offensive line, when we consider the talent in this draft?
I love the defensive line talent in this draft, but I do think it depends on what happens in free agency. If you get Trey Smith at right guard and Drew Dahlman at center, okay, well, then let's go defensive line at 10 and maybe again at 41. So I do think it depends a lot. The offensive tackle group is good. Will Campbell from LSU is all day, love him. And he could play left guard for a year. Then you figure out what you want to do with Braxton Jones, if you're willing to pay him or not. If you're not, okay, we got our guy. Boom, we kick him outside. Problem solved at left tackle. Kelvin Banks from Texas, similar situation. Guy started from week 1 at Texas. It's not easy to do. And started for 3 years, gave up 1 sack a year. Everybody's going to talk to you guys about the Georgia game. It's the worst game of his life. He only gave up 1 sack. So, yeah, Georgia got him a little bit. He gave up 1 sack, and his quarterback had concrete shoes on. So I do think tackle is absolutely in play, with the idea that they would have to play left guard for a year. Like, that's the key is, okay, can you play left guard? Because Braxton Jones has been above average, and you're paying him nothing. So I think you want to keep him and Darnell at the tackle spots, because guys, like, look at Buffalo. Continuity is so important on the offensive line. It's maybe more important than anything else is continuity. So I think having your bookend stay consistent is the key here.
If the Bears decide to use, right now they have 2 second-round picks. If they decide to use, let's say, Matt, an interior offensive lineman on one of those picks, are they going to get a starter-worthy player? Is the interior in this draft deep enough to think that or assume that?
It is, and the reason is because those tackles are being projected at inside for a lot of teams. Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, Josh Connerly. Those guys might be playing guard. Armand Membo from Missouri might be playing guard. And so I think what happens is guys like Donovan Jackson from Ohio State could be there at what is it, 41, 42? He could be there. Gray Zabel, the center from North Dakota State, could be there. The big guard from Arizona, whose last name I have not learned to pronunciate yet, and I apologize if his family's listening. I'll get there by April 24th, I promise. I do think that the guard talent is good. Now at center, not so much. I think there is a drop off at center to where from Gray Zabel, North Dakota State, round 2, to like Jared Wilson from Georgia is a round 3 guy. Jake Majors from Texas is probably a round 3, round 4 guy. It's not a great center class. If you're going to go there, like, you might want to just wait and get like a Drew Kendall from Boston College in the 5th round. There's not a round 1 center this year. And, historically, there's not anyone there's not a Creed Humphrey in this draft where you just know the guy's going to come in and be amazing from day one.
Well, those are the most important positions, and that's why we need guys like you for what these Bears are doing, and we're trying to get smarter on it. We're the Matt Miller, NFL draft scout. I love the idea of maybe drafting one of those tackles. I know Will Campbell might get dinged for arm length like Peter Skoronski did, supposedly. Yep. And so this idea of having him play inside, but then being like, oh, no, he's fine outside, thank you, is an interesting thing. Let's go back to center. So, like Zach Frazier, who was a draft pick last year for the Steelers and ended up being their dude and a stud and a badass and a tone setter. Like, we're trying to find Frank Ragnow, who's the Lions center and made that whole offensive line go, still does. And if we can't find that guy, if you're saying that guy's not in this draft, that informs free agency, which comes first. And we got to look at Drew Dahlman. We have to think about Coleman Shelton or sticking around with like an inferior product at center for a year, because maybe that's what you have to do.
Well, I think so. Yeah, we would all love Zach Frazier. I had a first-round grade on him last year. But here's something interesting. The Rams drafted Bo Limmer out of Arkansas in like the 6th round. And then they had an injury at center. That dude started all season and was really, really good because he had good pieces around him. And I think that's the key. If Drew Dahlman doesn't get folks excited, I understand that. And you're like, okay, how are we going to solve the center position? You might do it in the 4th or 5th round with a guy who's just played a hell of a lot of college football over the past 4 years. That's where I would be. I would be focused on that. SEC Big Ten. If you've played a lot of football over the past several years, there's a guy in this draft, Seth McLaughlin from Ohio State. He's just dealing with an injury. So you're going to have to be a little bit patient. But those guys do exist in this draft where you can say, again, Jake Majors from Texas might be a late third, early fourth round pick. He's played 4 years of college football in the Big 12 and SEC. He could step right in. And if you have, let's say you have Kelvin Banks at left guard and Trey Smith at right guard, yeah, you can survive with a top 120 pick at center.
Matt, we have reason to believe that with Ben Johnson being the head coach of the Chicago Bears, there could be a parade of tight ends making their way through Haugh. We know how he likes to use tight ends and the success he had with Sam Laporta. I don't know that the Bears would, unless they go best available athlete. Is there somebody, a couple of guys maybe that you could go through tight end wise, maybe at 10 if they got crazy, or somebody in the second or third round tight end talent if it exists?
Yeah, at 10 it's Tyler Warren from Penn State or bust, right? Like he's an elite player in this class. Like at 10 it's too early for Colston Loveland from Michigan, which is unfortunate because he would be like that. He is Sam Laporta. I'm convinced they're the same person.
Wow.
So he would be your scheme fit, right? He's beautiful for that. But this is a really, really good tight end class. Mason Taylor from LSU is going to be a second round pick. He's a really good player. Terrence Ferguson from Oregon is probably going to be a late second. He's a really good player. Harold Fannin from Bowling Green, a little bit undersized, but he caught everything at Bowling Green. He was the entire offense. No one could stop him. He's going to be a third round pick. Gunnar Helm from Texas is going to be a third round pick. Gavin Bartholomew is going to be a fourth round pick. This is a really good tight end class. And especially when you already have Cole Kmet, like you're looking to supplement. You're not exactly trying to reinvent the wheel necessarily. So I do think that this is a year where you can get those guys on offense. And I am excited to see that, running back, another wide receiver, another tight end. How does Ben Johnson kind of put his stamp on? And I think Ryan Poles is a hell of an evaluator. He can find football players. Now you have that coach that you trust and you can say, okay, like let's draft for your scheme because I've seen it before and I know it's going to work.
So do I have this right that you're a guy who would consider packaging some draft picks, giving up some assets to get Myles Garrett if you're the Bears?
Absolutely. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I know he's 29. I think he's got 3 more elite years of football in him. And I say that as someone who's like, you watch him just get smarter in terms of technique, and he hasn't hit that wall. He hasn't fallen off in terms of strength or speed, and he's not a one-trick pony where if he loses a little bit of speed, Myles Garrett at 90% in the speed department is still better than every defensive end in football because he's so long and he's so powerful. So even as he maybe loses a tiny step over the next 3 years, I would be totally fine with it. And it is dependent upon, do you believe you can figure out center guard center in this class, right? Like, how are you going to have the interior fixed? If you can do that, then I would be okay with going to get Myles Garrett because he's Myles Garrett. Like that completely changes everything you can do defensively.
Then you're talking about winning. You're talking, like you said, you got to fix that offensive line. Then if you could add that luxury, then you're talking about winning.
It's a luxury, though. You're not in a position. Bears are not in a position to give up draft capital for a luxury like that, man.
Man, and that is the hard conversation. But here's the thing, and I say this as a draft guy. Draft picks are a complete crapshoot. We know, Bears fans know that better than anyone. It doesn't matter. You might use the second overall pick on a quarterback, and he's terrible. So we put so much value in draft picks that have done nothing for you. Whereas Myles Garrett completely changes your franchise day one. There's no guesswork. You know exactly what he is.
Should have asked you earlier, real quick. Can you tell us what Brad Holmes did so well as a drafter that we need to hope Ben Johnson learned and brings here?
They drafted for their scheme, really well. And I think we've even seen Kansas City and Philadelphia do that, they draft for this scheme. And it's not that they're reaching for players, but when they took Jahmyr Gibbs, we all said, oh my God, that's too early for a running back. No one thinks that now, right? Or even when they took Jack Campbell, it was that's early for an off-ball linebacker. No, he's a great player. So they just draft for their scheme exceptionally well.
Matt Miller, you're the best. We'll send you a Gawagi hat. Thanks for the time. Appreciate you.
Good stuff, man.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate